Just a bit of announcement, guys. I decided to split my channel in two. Link to my relationship advice channel in the description. Now for our first story, titled, Am I the a-hole for yelling at my parents that their polyamory messed up my childhood? I believe it started when I was around 6 years old. My parents often had friends over in the house. I didn't know they were polyamorous, of course. One day, I was outside playing, got hurt, and when I ran inside, caught my parents making out with some random guy. They told me they have other adults that they love, and it's a completely normal thing. Me, being a child, just accepted that. They gave up being secretive, and their partners would constantly be around, even joining on outings. I remember that on my 10th birthday, they invited 3 of their partners, one of who I'd never seen before, and for the rest of the day, my parents just withdrew from my party and hung out with them. I never saw them doing anything explicit again, but they would kiss their partners, hug them, make flirty comments, something that would be normal between parents, but with many more people. Sometimes, I came home from school and my parents were gone, and there was some random adult in our house. Some of them seemed surprised that my parents even had a child. I always hated it, but since my parents had told me this was normal, I assumed many adults probably did similar things, and that it's just an adult thing all kids hate. Later, they had less partners and eventually seemed to stop. Not that I'd known for sure because I moved out with 17. I didn't think about it anymore. A year ago, I started therapy, other reasons. As usual, the topic of my upbringing came up and it brought back many feelings I wasn't aware of. I realized that although my parents were always good to me, I had never really felt close to any of them and still have a lot of resentment that they made me feel like I had to compete for my parents' attention with random strangers. A while ago, I visited them and they told me they are going to take part in a documentary about polyamorous family and that the producers would like to include interviews with the children, so they would love if I could agree and tell everyone that polyamory doesn't mess kids up. All my resentment bubbled up, and I said that I cannot agree because I would not be able to say anything positive. My parents looked shocked. I had never brought this up before, and asked why, and I unloaded all, that I always felt pushed aside. We barely had any family time without strangers intruding. It turned into an argument, and I became loud and yelled that the truth is, it did F me up, and they shouldn't have had a child if their #1 priority was screwing the whole world. My mother cried, and my father said I should probably leave. So I left and was shaken up for the rest of the week, but also felt regret because I've never made my mom cry before. Later, my father sent me a message that was like, "We are sorry you feel that way. Can we have a calm discussion about this soon?" Even though I tried to, it's like I can't reply. This argument brought something very emotional up in me. Am I the a-hole for hurting my parents over this, especially since I have never brought it up before? And now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. Do not back down and allow them to get you to recant, OP. Notice that they said, "We're sorry you feel this way," not "We're sorry for doing XYZ. They gave you a non-apology for making your childhood basically a wallflower to an orgy, no less. What sort of parents allow their kid to come home alone to a stranger in the house that didn't even know the kid existed? Good to me, my butt. That's horrible parenting. Don't forget inviting numerous strangers that they were screwing at the time to OP's birthday parties, and then completely neglecting OP on their birthday so that they could go F whoever they wanted at the time. These parents are atrocious and neglectful at best. I'd argue even worse. I guess it was both kinda. Some of the partners I only saw once, some 3 to 7 times, some hung around for weeks/months, and there was one man and one woman who were around for multiple years. Another thing that fell victim to me having to shorten the post was that many of them were young, like really, really young. That makes it creepier to me. Did any of them try to abuse you? Actually, no. Most of them completely ignored me, and I was happy to ignore them back. None of them really seemed like bad people or overly shady to me either, but it does seem extremely dangerous, right? My parents are kinda naive and tend to assume everyone is a good person. Not the a-hole. It wasn't your parents' polyamory that messed you up though. It was their bad parenting. They allowed strange adults around you all the time and neglected you when those strangers were around. They put you in a potentially dangerous situations by doing so. Having a committed poly partner who is not a stranger and known to you probably would have been fine, but a string of randoms or new people that would seriously mess with any kid. It's pretty much the same as a single mom always bringing her boyfriends around and not putting the kid first. But I've known a lot of poly people who get so into advocacy that they don't care about anyone's emotions that don't fit into their idealized view of what polyamory is supposed to be. Anyone who feels neglected or jealous or railroaded just isn't enlightened enough. If they're trying to bring OP into this propagandistic documentary, it sounds like that might be the situation. Oh, and not the a-hole for judgment. Not the a-hole. Really? They would leave complete strangers in the house without them for you to come home to? They made their lives front and center and their priority. Any child would resent that. Exactly this. Parents can still have healthy lives, but come the F on, there has to be a boundary. Especially with your own children. What OP's parents did is borderline abusive. It's nobody's business what goes on in your bedroom, just make sure you lock the door. Not the a-hole OP, don't back down to their gaslighting either. And that's the end of our first story. The next one is titled, Am I the a-hole for refusing to be in my father's wedding even though I cheated too? A story as old as time. My 27 female, father, 50, cheated on my mother for 5 years with a younger woman, currently 32, and he left my mother when mistress got pregnant. It tore our family apart. I resent my father because my mother actually loved him, and she is still dealing with this even 1 year after he left her. I stayed on okay terms with him because I was the one to pick up and drop off my younger brother at his place. Last week, when I picked up my brother, my father had big news. He proposed to his girlfriend and wanted me as his best woo man. It made me kinda mad, not gonna lie. But I kept calm and told him no. He said that what happened between him and mom was none of our business and that I should respect his new relationship. I said I respect it, but that doesn't mean I condone it. Obviously, I never hound him randomly about it, but I don't approve of it and I don't like her. She knew the whole time my mom and we existed. Well, my dad was having none of it and told me to get off my high horse because I had cheated too and I had no right. And yes? When I was 17, I was with this boy for 3 months. I went to a party, got crap-faced, and made out with a classmate for a total of 10 minutes. I felt so bad that I called my boyfriend crying and we talked it out. We broke up. I told my dad, and in 10 years, I never did something like that again. I have been with my partner for 5 years. I told him he could not equate it at all. He called me a hypocrite, and that he was glad to know who I am. Driving home, I felt like I was a bit harsh. He is still my father, and he is not a bad father. I just don't want to be in his wedding. I would still go, but am I the a-hole? Now let's read the top comments. Not the a-hole. You kissed another guy once when you were still a kid. Your dad hid the fact that he's been screwing another woman, did it for 5 years, and knocked her up. The situations aren't even comparable. Your dad is trying to manipulate you by saying you cheated too. The situations are not the same. He's the a-hole. The gall to even try to guilt her. The audacity. Or maybe he thought his marriage of over 15 years with 2 kids involved was the same as a teenage relationship. Not the a-hole. Your father is, though. Or that a drunken make-out session is the same as 5 years of lying and going behind your wife's back until you knock the other chick up. Especially since she immediately admitted to it. And they talked it out. The two situations are not even comparable. Sure, what she did at 17 definitely hurt her then boyfriend, but they were able to talk it out and reach a solution. Her father just snuck around and knew what he was doing, aka not drunk for 5 years straight. There was no way irrational conversation went down between the father and mother after a bombshell like that. Not the a-hole. You were 17 and made a drunken bad decision for 10 minutes, then felt horrible about it. He was in his 40s with a wife and children, made a calculated horrible decision for 5 years, and doesn't seem to feel bad or accept responsibility. Not the same thing at all. Opie's dad is the worst. And that she's even questioning herself over this at all makes me think she's used to this manipulation. I'm sitting here pissed off on her behalf. And then at the end, she says he's not a bad dad. Poor thing. I'd give you gold, but I'm poor. This is the right answer. Her father is comparing cheating on his wife, and then marrying said woman with a kiss, a single kiss in the life of a teenage girl who actually talked to her boyfriend after, and they broke up with absolutely no consequences. How he extrapolated that far, I can't understand. He's insane, not the a-hole. Now, on to the final story. Am I the a-hole for not having a relationship with a child born out of my dad's affair? I'm 24, and my younger sisters are 22 and 20. When I was 10, my dad left my mom for a woman he was having an affair with. Their baby was born a few months later. I didn't go for visitation and would only see my father alone a few times a month. Eventually, my sisters followed me and refused to visit in his home. My half-brother is now 14. My siblings and I do not have any relationship with him. We don't blame him, but we are just happier keeping things separated. Our half-brother has messaged all three of us separately on Instagram a few times. My youngest sister was the only one who replied and basically told him sorry, but it's best to keep things the way they are. I've just never responded. The last time we had a dinner with our dad, he brought our half-brother along. The three of us left quietly, without eating, and I later cursed out my dad for creating a very crappy situation. All three of us haven't talked to our dad since. I'm sorry if our dad and half-brother are hurt, but unfortunately, it's a crappy situation and we're happy as we are. Am I the a-hole? Now read the top comments and more info on the post. Info. Why do you maintain a relationship with your dad, who is the biggest A here, but refuse to talk to his kid? I could see cutting dad off, and thus functionally the kid, but it makes zero sense to keep the old man around if you're not going to accept your brother. It's barely a relationship if I'm being honest, and it's a relationship that we are stringing along at the insistence of my mother. But after the crappy thing he did at the last dinner, I don't think we'll be seeing much of him going forward. Yeah, I think that would be for the best. Keeping your dad in the picture, but refusing to get to know your brother sends a pretty devastating message to a young boy. Yeah, that's pretty sad for the kid who has done nothing wrong and reached out again and again. Soft a-hole here. You could cut them both out, or cut out your dad and give the kid a chance. You're harboring a lot for your failed parents' relationship, well, over a decade ago. Even your mom has moved on and is clearly trying to keep everyone happy, and you, well, not so much. You're the a-hole. Your half-brother hasn't done anything wrong. It's not his fault he was born. Bit only are you the a-hole. You've taught your younger sisters to act that way too. Once your half-brother gets over the emotional hurt of being rejected by his siblings, I believe he will be much happier without such narcissistic people in his life. I never thought my sisters say anything. They are women with their own brains who saw right through the situation. You're the a-hole. I understand where you are coming from, but there's no need to be rude to your brother. I wouldn't say you're an a-hole, but that you might be rude and inconsiderate to your half-brother. He obviously sees you as a family and wants a relationship with you guys. Maybe you could take a look at this point of view. I don't really think it's fair to completely ignore him because you're happy how things are. You left dinner without eating because of it. It comes off almost like you hate him, even if that isn't the case. I honestly don't want anything to do with him or my dad's wife. Speaking for myself, I never had the best relationships with my dad either. It's one out of obligation at best. My sisters and I were very clear that we did not want a relationship with his wife and child. And I think it was a really crappy move to bring along a child that we never met and were clear that we didn't want in our lives. Everyone sucks here. My first thought was you aren't the a-hole. But it's been 14 years. Not your half-brother's fault. At 24, you should be mature enough to see that and at least be civil. Not saying you have to like him or want a relationship with him, but he deserves, at a minimum, the same respect you'd give the person standing behind you in the checkout line. Ask yourself what your reaction would have been if your father had brought a total stranger to the dinner. You might have been a bit uncomfortable, but would you have walked out without eating? That difference in attitude right there is your problem and makes you the a-hole. What you did is a form of bullying. No different than moving seats when the weird girl in school sits beside you. Which leaves me wondering what exactly happened when you were 10 that leaves you so bitter, petty, and vengeful. Your parents, both father and mother, deserve some share of the blame for handling this so badly that you and your younger sisters are still traumatized. Her sisters are obviously influenced by her behavior. And it bugs me that she will not give this kid a chance. She still has a relationship of sorts with her brother and no one is asking for her to call the new wife Mom. But it costs just a little bit of pride to get to know her brother.